The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers hummed with nervous energy. 12 species had gathered for what many considered the most important vote in galactic history. The problem of humanity had grown too large to ignore. Ambassador, Krill adjusted his breathing apparatus as he approached the central podium. His species, the Zentari, had dealt with humans longer than most. What started as curious first contact had evolved into centuries of headaches. Humans refused to follow established trade protocols. They expanded into restricted sectors without permission. Worst of all, they asked too many questions about things that were supposed to remain secret. The holographic display showed human territory spreading across 17 star systems. Each colony ship that launched meant more complications for the established order. The humans bred quickly, adapted faster than any known species, and showed an alarming tendency to turn uninhabitable worlds into thriving settlements. The motion before us today requires no lengthy debate, Krill announced to the assembled delegates. Humanity has proven incompatible with galactic civilization. They disrupt trade agreements, ignore territorial boundaries, and refuse to accept their designated role in the established hierarchy. The Vorthon delegate, a creature resembling a giant mantis, clicked its mandibles in agreement. The aquatic depths spoke through their translation devices, their watery voices adding wet whispers to the conversation. One by one, the species voiced their concerns about human expansion. The solution presented itself months ago during a routine survey of dangerous worlds. Terminus 7 sat in a forgotten sector, catalogued as a Class 69 Deathworld. The designation meant certain death for any known species, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature shifts, unstable geology, and predatory wildlife that made nightmares seem pleasant by comparison. We propose humanitarian relocation, Krill continued, his words carefully chosen. The official documents would speak of generous land grants and new opportunities. The reality was simpler. Send the humans somewhere they could not possibly survive. Then claim tragic accident when rescue missions found only empty settlements. The vote was unanimous. 12 species agreed that humanity's 50,000 colonists aboard their newest colony ship would receive coordinates to their new home. The ship's captain would be told it was a gift from the Council, recognition of humanity's pioneering spirit. Let them pioneer their way to extinction. 3 days later, the transmission reached the human colony ship Perseverance as it drifted between stars, waiting for clearance to establish their next settlement. The bridge crew gathered around. The main display as the official message played. David Hayes had captained colony ships for 15 years. He recognized political doublespeak when he heard it. The Council's sudden generosity felt wrong. Humans had been requesting permission to settle new worlds for decades, only to face endless bureaucratic delays. Now they were offering an entire planet with no strings attached. Run a full analysis on these coordinates, Hayes ordered his navigation officer. The young woman's fingers danced across her console, pulling up star charts and survey data. Sir, this system isn't on any of our commercial navigation charts. It's listed as unexplored territory in our databases. Hayes frowned. The Galactic Council maintained detailed records of every system in known space. If a world wasn't on human charts but the Council was offering it freely, there had to be a reason. What about Council survey data? They must have records if they're offering us settlement rights. The communication officer shook his head. No detailed surveys in the official transmission, sir. Just coordinates and a brief notation about atmospheric composition and gravity within human tolerance. The ship's chief engineer, Tom Bradley, joined the bridge conversation. His weathered face showed concern as he reviewed the limited data. Captain, I've been checking power consumption reports from our engines. We've been burning fuel waiting for settlement approval longer than planned. We don't have enough reserves to reach any of our original target worlds. The trap became clearer. The Council had delayed human settlement requests until the colony ship was committed to accepting whatever offer came next. 50,000 men, women, and children were running low on supplies light years from the nearest human outpost. Sir, the navigation officer called out. I'm picking up automated survey probes in the target system. They're broadcasting basic Environmental data. The information that appeared on screen confirmed Hayes's suspicions. Surface temperature fluctuations between -40 and +60 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure at barely breathable levels. High concentrations of corrosive particles. Seismic activity registering constant tectonic instability. Dr. Amy Foster, the mission's chief medical officer, studied the biological survey data with growing alarm. Captain, the native life forms are showing predatory adaptations I've never seen. Acid-resistant hide, reinforced bone structures, multiple redundant organ systems. These aren't just dangerous animals. They're living weapons evolved for maximum killing efficiency. Hayes gathered his senior staff in the briefing room. The choice before them was simple and terrible. They could attempt to reach one of their original target worlds and risk running out of life support somewhere in empty space. Or they could accept the Council's generous offer and land on a world that was clearly designed to kill them. The colonists signed up for pioneering work, Hayes said finally. They knew the risks when they left Earth, but they trusted us to find them a home, not a graveyard. Chief Security Officer Rick Stone had been quiet during the discussion. He was a veteran of the colony wars, one of the conflicts that had taught humanity they could not rely on others for protection. Captain, I've been thinking about this council offer. It feels like they want us gone permanently. Maybe they think this planet will solve their human problem once and for all. That's occurred to me, Hayes admitted. The question is whether we're tough enough to prove them wrong. The Perseverance carried more than just colonists. The ship's cargo holds contained everything needed to establish a self-sufficient settlement: advanced manufacturing equipment, agricultural supplies, medical facilities, and defensive systems. The colonists themselves represented humanity's most adaptable individuals. Engineers who could build anything from raw materials. Doctors who had treated diseases on a dozen different worlds. Farmers who had grown food in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to desert wastes. Plot a course for Terminus 7, Hayes ordered. Send a message to all department heads. We have 3 weeks to prepare for landfall on a world that's supposed to kill us. Let's make sure we disappoint some people. As the Perseverance altered course toward the coordinates provided by the Galactic Council, automated monitoring stations throughout the sector began transmitting updates. The human ship was committed. The trap was sprung. Soon the galaxy's most troublesome species would be just another entry in the survey logs of failed colonies. The Council had no idea what they had just unleashed on Terminus 7. The first thing that tried to kill them was the weather. Hurricane winds screamed across the landing zone as the Perseverance's shuttles fought through Terminus 7's atmosphere. What the orbital surveys had called atmospheric disturbances turned out to be a constant storm system that treated incoming spacecraft like unwelcome intruders. 2 shuttles were forced to make emergency landings 5 kilometers from the planned site when their navigation systems failed in the electromagnetic chaos. Lisa Chen pressed her face against the shuttle's small porthole as they descended through layers of rust-colored clouds. The landscape below looked like someone had taken Mars and made it angrier. Jagged rock formations jutted from red soil like broken teeth. Strange atmospheric lightning danced between crystal formations that dotted the terrain. In the distance, she could see what looked like geysers shooting columns of steam and possibly acid into the air. The shuttle touched down with a bone-jarring impact that threw several colonists against their safety restraints. Before anyone could celebrate surviving the landing, the first crisis announced itself with a sound like tearing metal. "Hull breach in Section C," the pilot called out. "Everyone stay in your seats. We're losing cabin pressure." Tom Bradley was out of his restraints before the pilot finished speaking. The chief engineer grabbed an emergency kit and headed for the breach, while the shuttle filled with the acrid smell of Terminus 7's atmosphere. Through his breathing mask, he could taste metal and something that reminded him of burning electronics. "Acid in the air," he shouted to the others as he applied emergency sealant to a crack in the shuttle's outer hull. "The atmosphere's eating through our heat shielding." Outside, the first colonists to set foot on their new home were learning that the planet's weather patterns included precipitation that could dissolve unprotected metal. The rain falling from the storm clouds was a weak acid solution that turned standard environmental suits into temporary protection at best. Dr. Amy Foster was treating the first casualties within an hour of landfall. 2 colonists had removed their helmets too soon and suffered chemical burns to their respiratory systems. A third had been attacked by something that emerged from a crack in the ground when he wandered too far from the shuttle. It looked like a snake, the injured man gasped as Foster cleaned his wounds. But it had teeth like a chainsaw and moved faster than anything I've ever seen. The creature that had attacked him was 6 feet long with segmented armor plating and multiple rows of serrated teeth. More importantly, it was one of dozens that lived in the fissure network under the landing site. The colonists had chosen their settlement location based on orbital surveys that showed flat, stable ground. They had not realized they were building on top of a predator highway. Rick Stone organized the first hunting party after the third attack in 2 days. The security chief had dealt with dangerous wildlife on other colony worlds, but Terminus 7's native species broke every rule he thought he knew about planetary ecosystems. The snappers that lived in the ground moved in coordinated packs and showed problem-solving intelligence. They could bite through standard colony equipment and seemed to learn from each encounter with humans. Worse, they were just the smallest of the local predators. "We've got something bigger moving in the hills," Stone reported to Hayes during their second-day briefing. "Heat signatures suggest something the size of a terrestrial elephant, but the movement patterns are all wrong. It's stalking us." The colonists worked around the clock to establish basic shelter. The prefabricated structures they had brought were designed for normal colony environments, not acid rain and seismic instability. Every building had to be reinforced and sealed against atmospheric contamination. Tom Bradley's engineering teams discovered that Terminus 7's stable geology was anything but. The ground beneath their feet was laced with thermal vents that could open without warning. The first permanent structure they attempted to build collapsed when the foundation heated up and expanded beyond the material's tolerance limits. "We need to adapt everything," Bradley told Hayes as they stood in the ruins of what was supposed to be the colony's main administration building. The environmental readings we got from orbit were optimistic compared to ground conditions, but humans had always been good at adapting. Linda Park, the colony's lead agricultural specialist, established the first successful food production within 3 weeks of landfall. She had brought seed samples from Earth and several other human colonies, but none of them could grow in Terminus 7's contaminated soil. Instead, she began experimenting with local plant species. The native vegetation had evolved to survive in the planet's harsh conditions. Park discovered that several species could be processed into edible supplements. More importantly, she found that Earth plants could be grafted onto local root systems, creating hybrid crops that drew nutrients from the alien soil while producing familiar food. "It's not going to win any cooking awards," Park told the colonists as she distributed samples of her first successful crop. "But it will keep us alive while we figure out better solutions." The real breakthrough came when the colonists stopped thinking of Terminus 7 as an enemy and started treating it as a resource. The planet's extreme conditions were also extreme opportunities for those clever enough to exploit them. The thermal vents that made construction difficult could also provide unlimited geothermal power. The acid rain that damaged equipment could be collected and processed into industrial chemicals. Even the predatory wildlife represented protein sources for colonists willing to turn the food chain upside down. The first rock bear was killed by accident when it attacked a mining team working near the thermal vents. The creature was 3 meters tall with natural armor plating that could deflect small arms fire. It took explosives and coordinated tactics to bring down. But when the colonists processed the carcass, they discovered that rock bear hide was incredibly durable and the meat, properly prepared, was both nutritious and plentiful. "We killed one of the apex predators," Stone reported with satisfaction. "The other wildlife is giving us more space now. I think they're starting to realize we're not prey animals." By the end of their second month on Terminus 7, the colony had established a perimeter defense system using a combination of human technology and weaponized local geology. Motion sensors could detect approaching predators through the fissure network. The acid rain was being collected and concentrated into defensive chemical barriers. The colonists had even begun training some of the smaller native species as early warning systems. Dr. Foster recorded the colony's first birth 6 weeks after landfall. The baby girl was born healthy despite exposure to the planet's harsh environment during development. More surprisingly, preliminary medical scans suggested enhanced lung capacity and improved radiation resistance compared to human baseline. Children born here are going to be different, Foster told Hayes privately. Their bodies are already adapting to local conditions in ways we didn't expect. Hayes stood at the observation deck of their newly constructed command center and looked out over what was becoming New Haven settlement. Permanent structures now dotted the landscape, their walls made from processed rock bear hide and crystallized mineral deposits. Gardens grew in covered areas where earth plants hybridized with local species. Mining operations extracted rare elements from the planet's unstable geology. Most importantly, the population was not just surviving but growing. 53,000 humans now called Terminus 7 home, with more children on the way. The Galactic Council's monitoring probes continued, transmitting data to distant receivers, but the reports they sent were not what anyone had expected. Instead of casualty lists and failed settlement logs, the probes recorded construction activity, population growth, and expanding territorial boundaries. On a dozen worlds, the species that had voted to exile humanity began receiving reports that made no sense. The humans were supposed to be dead by now. Instead, they appeared to be thriving on a planet that should have killed them in days. Something had gone very wrong with the plan. 6 months after the first human stepped onto what they now called New Terra, the planet looked different from orbit. Green patches spread across the red landscape like healing wounds. Where orbital surveys had once shown barren wasteland, monitoring, satellites now detected organized agricultural zones, industrial complexes, and residential areas that pulsed with energy signatures. Most disturbing to distant observers was the fact that the human settlements were growing. Linda Park stood in the middle of what colonists had started calling the miracle gardens, watching earth tomatoes grow from roots adapted from native Terran crystal moss. The hybrid plants thrived in soil that would have killed their parent species, drawing minerals from the planet's toxic ground while producing food that tasted almost like home. The yield rates are exceeding our most optimistic projections, Park reported to the Colony Council. We're not just feeding our current population anymore. We're producing surplus food that we can preserve for future growth. The transformation had started small. Individual colonists experimenting with local materials trying to solve immediate problems. Tom Bradley had discovered that the planet's crystal formations could be harvested and processed into building materials stronger than anything they had brought from Earth. The crystals grew naturally in the planet's high-energy environment, self-repairing when damaged and nearly indestructible once properly shaped. Dr. Amy Foster had found that several native plant species contained compounds that enhanced human immune responses. Colonists who consumed processed local vegetation showed increased resistance to the planet's environmental hazards. More importantly, their children were developing adaptations that made them perfectly suited for life on New Terra. The second generation is showing remarkable changes, Foster explained to Hayes as they walked through the colony's expanded medical facility. Enhanced lung capacity allows them to process the thin atmosphere more efficiently. Improved radiation tolerance means they can work outside during high solar periods without protection. Most interesting, their bone density is adapting to the planet's stronger gravity. But the real revolution was happening in the industrial sectors. The mining teams had discovered that New Terra's unstable geology was actually a resource goldmine. The planet's core contained rare elements essential for faster-than-light travel, deposited in accessible locations by the constant seismic activity that made the world so dangerous. We're sitting on the galaxy's largest known deposits of quantum-grade crystalline matrices, reported Chief Mining Engineer Dan Roberts as he presented his findings to the colony leadership. The same geological instability that makes this planet a Class 69 Deathworld also makes it incredibly valuable. The mining operations had expanded beyond simple resource extraction. Human engineers had learned to work with the planet's natural processes instead of fighting them. Thermal vents provided unlimited power for processing facilities. The acid rain was collected and refined into industrial chemicals. Even the seismic activity was harnessed through specialized equipment that converted ground movement into usable energy. Rick Stone's security teams had evolved from defensive operations to wildlife management. The native predators were no longer seen as threats to be eliminated, but as resources to be carefully harvested and controlled. "We've established breeding programs for 3 species," Stone reported during the monthly colony briefing. "The snappers are being domesticated as pest control and early warning systems. Rock bears are proving useful as heavy labor animals once properly trained. The crystal birds are excellent messengers and scouts." The most successful program involved the massive predators the colonists had nicknamed mountain crushers. These elephant-sized creatures had been the terror of the early settlement, capable of destroying buildings and killing dozens of people in a single attack. But human hunters had discovered that the creatures were highly intelligent and could be negotiated with rather than simply fought. "They're territorial, not mindlessly aggressive," Stone explained. "Once we established boundaries they respect, they've actually become protective of our settlements. Nothing else on this planet is stupid enough to attack something a mountain crusher considers part of its territory." The transformation was most visible in New Haven itself. What had started as a desperate cluster of emergency shelters had grown into a planned city of over 60,000 people. The architecture combined human design principles with materials and techniques adapted to local conditions. Buildings grew as much as they were built, using living crystal formations that expanded and strengthened over time. The residential areas featured gardens where earth flowers bloomed alongside native species that painted the landscape in colors that had no names in human languages. Children played games that involved dodging snappers and racing crystal birds through obstacle courses that would have terrified their parents just months earlier. "The kids don't see this as a hostile environment," Foster observed, as she watched a group of youngsters using tamed snappers as pets. "To them, this is just home. They're developing instincts for living here that adults have to learn through trial and error." The educational system had adapted as quickly as everything else. Children learned standard human subjects alongside practical skills like predator behavior prediction, crystal formation cultivation, and atmospheric toxin management. The colony's teachers were preparing the next generation for life on a world that operated by rules no human had ever encountered before. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the colonists viewed their relationship with the Galactic Council. The official communications from the Council spoke of concern for human welfare and requests for regular status reports. The colonists were not fooled. "They expected us to die here," Hayes told his senior staff during a closed-door meeting. "Every communication we receive makes that more obvious. They're surprised we're still alive, confused by our success, and starting to worry about what it means." The Council's monitoring probes had been joined by more sophisticated surveillance equipment. Ships passed through the system at irregular intervals, maintaining distance but clearly observing human activity. Some of the surveillance was not particularly subtle. "We're being watched," Stone reported. "Long-range sensors are detecting regular flyby reconnaissance from at least 3 different species. They're not trying very hard to hide their interest." The colonists responded by expanding their defensive capabilities. The planet's natural hazards were being weaponized and integrated into settlement security. Approaching ships found themselves dealing with artificially enhanced electromagnetic storms, manipulated seismic activity, and coordinated responses from domesticated predator species. "We're not hiding what we're doing," Hayes explained to the Colony Council. "We're advertising it. Let them see that we're not just surviving here. Let them understand that we're thriving." The most powerful advertisement was the colony's growth rate. Immigration from other human settlements had begun as word spread about New Terra's success. Ships arrived monthly carrying families and individuals who wanted to be part of humanity's most successful colony. The population had grown to nearly 80,000 and showed no signs of slowing. Each new arrival brought skills and knowledge from other human worlds. The colony was becoming a melting pot of human adaptability, combining the best survival techniques from dozens of different environments. Engineers who had worked in asteroid mining operations improved the crystal harvesting systems. Agricultural specialists from desert worlds contributed to the hybrid crop development programs. "We're not just building a colony anymore," Hayes realized as he reviewed population and production reports. We're building something that's never existed before. A human civilization perfectly adapted to conditions that were supposed to kill us. The transformation was complete when the first human child born on New Terra took their first steps outside without environmental protection. The little girl breathed the thin, acidic atmosphere as easily as other children breathed Earth normal air. Her skin showed no reaction to the corrosive particles that floated in the atmosphere. When a curious snapper approached, she laughed and reached out to pet it like a friendly dog. This is their world now, Foster said as she watched the child play. Not a place they're trying to survive, but the place they were born to live. The Galactic Council had intended to exile humanity to a place where they would quietly disappear. Instead, they had given humans exactly what they needed most: a world challenging enough to force them to become something new, something stronger, something that could not be ignored or dismissed. The exile had backfired in ways the Council was only beginning to understand. The first Galactic Council survey ship to visit New Terra arrived with scientific curiosity and left with something approaching terror. Dr. Vex, the Zentari xenobiologist leading the research team, had studied dozens of failed colony attempts on Class 69 Deathworlds. The pattern was always the same: initial optimism, gradual decline, final desperate transmissions, then silence. The survey ships would find ruins, scattered equipment, and environmental data explaining why the settlement had inevitably collapsed. The steadfast inquiry emerged from hyperspace 18 months after the human exile and immediately detected something wrong. Long-range sensors showed massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Orbital scans revealed organized settlements, active mining operations, and atmospheric modifications that should have been impossible. This cannot be accurate, Dr. Vex muttered as he reviewed the initial sensor readings. No known species can survive on Terminus 7 for more than a few solar cycles. The humans should have been extinct within days of landfall. The survey team's first shock came when they attempted to establish standard orbital reconnaissance patterns. Their ship's navigation systems began experiencing interference from artificially enhanced electromagnetic fields. What had been natural, atmospheric disturbances during the original planetary surveys, had been amplified and directed into defensive barriers. We're being actively scanned, the ship's tactical officer reported. Multiple tracking systems are painting us from the surface. They know we're here and they're watching everything we do. The surface installations were not simply surviving in the hostile environment. They were using the environment as a weapon. The humans had learned to manipulate the planet's natural storm systems, directing electromagnetic pulses at approaching spacecraft. Landing became a negotiated process rather than a simple navigation exercise. Dr. Vex and his research team received landing coordinates and escort instructions transmitted in perfect Zentari language. The humans were not just alive but organized enough to monitor galactic communications and respond in appropriate diplomatic protocols. The landing site was a revelation that challenged everything the survey team thought they knew about Deathworld colonization. Where they expected to find desperate survivors clinging to life in emergency shelters, they discovered a thriving city of nearly 100,000 people. The population growth alone is impossible, Dr. Vex recorded in his personal log. Even under ideal conditions, colony populations require decades to reach this size. These humans have tripled their numbers in less than 2 standard years. The human settlement defied every principle of xenobiology. Buildings constructed from processed native materials were stronger than the prefabricated structures most species brought to new worlds. Gardens flourished in soil that should have been too toxic to support any form of agriculture. Children played in atmospheric conditions that would require environmental suits for adult members of most galactic species. Governor Hayes greeted the survey team with professional courtesy and barely concealed amusement. He offered them tours of successful mining operations, samples of hybrid agricultural products, and detailed records of population growth and industrial development. Every piece of evidence contradicted the assumption that humans would quickly die on Terminus 7. "We appreciate the Council's concern for our welfare," Hayes told Dr. Vex as they walked through the colony's central market district. "As you can..." See, we've managed to establish a sustainable settlement. In fact, we're producing surplus resources that might be valuable for galactic trade. The market itself was a testament to human adaptability. Vendors sold processed rock bear leather, refined crystal formations, and hybrid foods that had never existed before human arrival. Native predators that had been the terror of early settlement now served as pack animals and guardians. Children who had been born on New Terra moved through the crowds with confidence, breathing acidic air and showing no fear of creatures that would panic adult members of most galactic species. Dr. Vex's research team attempted to conduct standard biological and environmental assessments, but their equipment was not designed for the extremes of New Terra's modified ecosystem. Atmospheric readings fluctuated beyond instrument capabilities. Soil samples contained mineral concentrations that should have been lethal to carbon-based life forms. Most disturbing, biological scans of the human colonists showed adaptations that were occurring in real time. The adult humans are showing enhanced respiratory capacity, improved radiation tolerance, and modified bone density, Dr. Vex reported to his superiors. The children born on this world display even more extreme adaptations. They are becoming something that is technically still human, but adapted for an environment that should not support human life. The survey team's 3-day visit stretched into a week as they struggled to document what they were seeing. Every attempt to identify weaknesses in the human settlement revealed additional strengths. The colony's defensive systems incorporated the planet's natural hazards into coordinated protection networks. Economic systems were producing rare materials that were essential for galactic technology. Population growth was accelerating rather than declining. Most unsettling was the realization that the humans were no longer dependent on outside support. They had achieved complete self-sufficiency in an environment designed to kill them. Worse, they were beginning to expand beyond their original settlement site. We've detected 3 additional population centers, the survey team reported back to the Galactic Council. The humans are not simply surviving on Terminus 7. They are colonizing it systematically. At current growth rates, they will achieve planetary dominance within a single generation. The second survey mission arrived 6 months later with enhanced equipment and a larger scientific team. Their objective was to conduct detailed analysis of human adaptation methods and identify potential weaknesses that could be exploited if necessary. They carried classification codes that indicated this was no longer a welfare check, but strategic intelligence gathering. The enhanced research vessel Discovery never made it into orbit. The ship's automated distress beacon was recovered 3 days later, embedded in a crystalline formation that had clearly been shaped by intelligent hands. The beacon itself was undamaged, but the message it contained was brief and direct. Unauthorized military surveillance detected. Vessel and crew processed according to New Terra colonial defense protocols. Personal effects available for pickup at designated neutral coordinates. The marker where the beacon was found contained inscriptions in 17 different galactic languages. The message was consistent across all translations. New Terra is a sovereign human territory. Trespassers will be processed for resources. Trade negotiations welcome through appropriate diplomatic channels. Dr. Vex analyzed the marker's composition and discovered it was made from materials that did not exist anywhere else in known space. The humans had not simply adapted to their environment. They had learned to manipulate it at a molecular level, creating new substances from the planet's extreme conditions. The implications terrified the Galactic Council. The humans had not only survived their exile, but had turned their prison into a fortress. They controlled unique resources, had developed defensive capabilities that could threaten galactic shipping, and were growing in population and territory at unprecedented rates. More disturbing were the reports from other sectors. Human colonies throughout the galaxy had begun receiving emigration requests from species that had never shown interest in human territories. Word was spreading that humanity had successfully colonized a Class 69 Deathworld, and that achievement was attracting attention from groups that had been marginalized by the existing galactic order. The exile was supposed to eliminate the human problem, Ambassador Krill reported to the Emergency Council session. Instead, it has created something far worse. The humans now control strategic resources, have developed military capabilities we do not understand, and are attracting allies from species we had successfully contained. The most troubling intelligence came from monitoring stations near human space. Ships were arriving at New Terra from across the galaxy, not just human vessels but also craft belonging to species that had been excluded from Council membership. The failed exile was becoming a rallying point for everyone who had been disappointed by the existing galactic order. We created exactly what we were trying to prevent, Krill admitted in his private report to Zentari High Command. We gave humanity a cause, a territory they could defend, and proof that they could succeed where others had failed. Now they are no longer asking for permission to expand. They are simply taking what they want. The survey data was clear and undeniable. New Terra was not just a successful human colony. It was becoming the center of a new power structure that existed outside the Council's control. The humans had turned their death sentence into a declaration of independence. The Galactic Council faced a choice between accepting the new reality or taking military action against a species that had just proven they could thrive in conditions designed to kill them. Neither option offered a favorable outcome for the established order. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had evolved into something dangerous. The message that arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters was not a plea for rescue or forgiveness. It was a business proposal. The transmission reached the Council chambers 2 years after humanity's exile to what was now officially called New Terra. The signal was broadcast on diplomatic frequencies using proper protocols and encrypted with security codes that should have been impossible for the exiled colonists to possess. Governor Hayes appeared on the central holographic display wearing a formal diplomatic uniform and standing in what was clearly the command center of a major colonial installation. Behind him, through reinforced transparent walls, the council delegates could see a thriving city stretching to the horizon under an alien sky. Greetings to the Galactic Council, Hayes began, with the kind of calm professionalism that made everyone in the chamber deeply uncomfortable. I am David Hayes, elected governor of the New Terran Republic. I come before you today not as a supplicant, but as the representative of humanity's newest and most successful colony. The numbers Hayes presented were impossible to dispute. New Terra's human population had grown to over 150,000 people. The colony had achieved complete self-sufficiency and was producing surplus resources for export. Most significantly, they controlled the galaxy's only known source of quantum-grade crystalline matrices, the rare materials essential for faster-than-light travel. Our mining operations have identified deposits sufficient to supply galactic shipping needs for the next millennium, Hayes continued. We are prepared to enter into trade agreements with any species interested in mutual benefit. Our terms are simple: recognition of New Terran sovereignty and equal status in galactic commerce. Ambassador Krill felt his respiratory system constrict as he realized what was happening. The humans had not simply survived their exile. They had used it to establish an unassailable strategic position. Every ship that traveled between star systems depended on technology that now required materials under human control. The presentation included detailed surveys of New Terra's transformed ecosystem. Areas that had been barren wasteland when the humans arrived now supported engineered biomes that combined Earth species with native organisms. Industrial complexes extracted and processed rare elements using techniques that had been developed specifically for the planet's extreme conditions. Most disturbing was the evidence of defensive capabilities. The humans had weaponized their environment so thoroughly that approaching the planet without permission was effectively impossible. Electromagnetic storms could be directed at incoming vessels. Seismic activity could be triggered to disrupt orbital mechanics. Even the native predators had been incorporated into territorial defense systems. New Terra's unique conditions have allowed us to develop technologies and techniques that are unavailable anywhere else in known space, Hayes explained. We have learned to thrive in environments that other species consider uninhabitable. This expertise is available for consultation and collaboration with properly authorized parties. The subtext was clear. The humans were offering their services as colonization specialists for worlds that had been written off as impossible to settle. They were positioning themselves as the galaxy's experts on survival in extreme conditions. The species that had tried to exile them to certain death were now being offered the opportunity to hire them as consultants. The council chamber erupted in heated discussion as delegates realized the magnitude of their strategic error. The Vorthan representative clicked mandibles in agitation. The aquatic depths released stress pheromones that clouded their environmental tanks. Every species that had voted for human exile was now faced with the reality that they had created their own worst nightmare. The motion before us is simple, Hayes concluded. New Terra requests full recognition as a sovereign territory and equal trading status with all galactic civilizations. In return, we offer access to unique resources and specialized knowledge that cannot be obtained elsewhere. We believe this arrangement serves everyone's interests. The transmission ended with coordinates for a trade delegation to visit New Terra and observe the colony's capabilities firsthand. The invitation was extended to all council species with the understanding that diplomatic protocols would be strictly enforced by New Terran defense systems. The vote that followed was unlike any in council history. For the first time, the 12 species faced a decision where military action was not a viable option. New Terra's defenses made invasion impossible, and the humans controlled resources that the galaxy could not function without. The Zentari delegation requested a private session to review their options. Ambassador Krill found himself in the impossible position of explaining to his superiors how humanity's exile had backfired so completely. Military assessment indicates that conventional assault on New Terra would require fleet resources beyond our current capabilities, Krill reported to the Zentari High Command. The humans have turned the planet's environment into a defensive system that we cannot overcome with existing technology. The strategic analysis was even more damaging. New Terra had become a beacon for species that had been excluded from the galactic power structure. Ships from dozens of non-council civilizations were arriving in human space, seeking trade agreements and defensive alliances. The exile that was supposed to eliminate human influence was creating a rival power block. They are offering membership in something they call the Free Trade Collective, Krill continued. Any species that recognizes New Terran sovereignty receives access to quantum-grade materials and colonization assistance for previously impossible worlds. They are building an alternative to council authority. The economic implications were equally troubling. Human mining operations on New Terra were producing rare elements at unprecedented efficiency. They were offering these materials at prices significantly below what council-controlled sources could match. Galactic shipping companies were already negotiating supply contracts with the New Terran Republic. Dr. Vex submitted his final research report 6 months after the humans' diplomatic presentation. His conclusions challenged fundamental assumptions about species adaptability and survival limitations. The humans have not simply adapted to Terminus 7, Vex wrote. They have evolved a symbiotic relationship with one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. Children born on New Terra display physiological modifications that are beyond anything in our xenobiological databases. They are becoming something that is technically still human but functionally represents a new subspecies. The report included detailed observations of New Terran society. The colony had developed cultural practices that incorporated native species into daily life. Educational systems taught children to navigate environmental hazards that would kill adults from most other species. Economic structures were based on sustainable exploitation of planetary resources that other civilizations would consider too dangerous to approach. Most significantly, Vex concluded, the humans have proven that Class 69 Deathworlds can be successfully colonized using techniques they have developed. This knowledge represents a strategic advantage that could reshape galactic civilization. There are hundreds of worlds previously considered uninhabitable that might now be viable for human settlement. The Council faced its final crisis when 3 additional species formally requested withdrawal from Council membership and applied for alliance with the New Terran Republic. The Corridon Mining Guilds, the Halax Research Consortium, and the independent trading federation known as the Void Runners all announced they were joining the Free Trade Collective. The humans have created exactly what we feared most, Krill admitted during the emergency session. An alternative power structure that offers what we cannot: opportunity for species that have been marginalized by council policies. The breaking point came when human exploration ships began establishing mining operations on previously unclaimed Deathworlds throughout the sector. Each new settlement followed the New Terra model, small initial populations that adapted to extreme conditions and grew into self-sufficient colonies. Within months, humanity was claiming territory that other species had written off as uninhabitable. Ambassador Krill stood before the council for what he knew would be the last time as the primary opposition to human expansion. The choice was simple: adapt to the new reality or watch galactic civilization reorganize around human capabilities. The Zentari Empire formally recognizes the sovereignty of the New Terran Republic, Krill announced to the shocked assembly. We request immediate trade negotiations and offer full diplomatic relations with human colonial authorities. The announcement triggered a cascade of similar declarations. The Vorthon hierarchy, the Depths Collective, and 7 other council species quickly followed suit. Within hours, the New Terran Republic had achieved full diplomatic recognition from the majority of galactic civilization. The humans had not simply survived their exile. They had used it to demonstrate that they were uniquely qualified to succeed where others failed. The species that had voted to eliminate them were now competing for the privilege of hiring them as partners and consultants. Governor Hayes received the council's formal recognition in the same command center where he had recorded his initial diplomatic message. Around him, New Terra continued its impossible growth, a living testament to humanity's refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. The exile was supposed to be our end, Hayes told his senior staff as they reviewed the diplomatic messages flooding in from across the galaxy. Instead, it became our beginning. They tried to send us somewhere we would disappear quietly. Instead, they gave us a stage to show the galaxy what humans can accomplish when we stop asking for permission. The transformation was complete. Humanity had evolved from a troublesome species seeking acceptance into the dominant force in galactic colonization. The council that had tried to eliminate them was now reduced to junior partner status in a civilization increasingly shaped by human innovation and adaptability. New Terra stood as proof that exile could become empire, that death sentences could become declarations of independence, and that sometimes the greatest favor an enemy can do is to force you to discover how strong you really are. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.